On today's episode of Locked On Wild, have you seen the free agent center list? Not great.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we take a look at a couple of names that have been making the rounds for potential interest for the Minnesota Wild. In particular, one whose team just lost in very dud fashion in Game 7. We'll talk about Mitch Marner here today, as well as just looking at the names that are out there. And I'm just going to say right now, not an inspiring list for a position that the Wild definitely need to firm up, and could do so by simply not moving a player that plays that position. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild. Alex Micheletti joins us here today. And Alex, we got the final four that are left. The Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers, and the Carolina Hurricanes. The Toronto Maple Leafs, despite a 2-0 lead in the series, could not get it done. And not only did they lose in 7, they get absolutely boat raced in Game 7 for the second time in 2 games. And a name that has drawn considerable interest here in Minnesota because he's a 100-point player, was particularly quiet in the series. So let's just start. Mitch Marner to the Minnesota Wild. Am I crazy for saying, no thanks, I'm good?
No, we've already seen enough players on the Wild not perform in the playoffs. We don't need another one here in Minnesota with Marner. You know, I think he's going to go to a place where there isn't as much media attention on him and go out west as west as possible that he can. A Utah or an Anaheim that has just a boatload of money to throw at him.
Yeah, because that's the biggest sticking point is the fact that he's going to command $12-13 million a year on the free agent market, as was brought up during the broadcast. Players like this, and look, he's a good player. Right. Obviously, a 100-point player that's nothing to turn your nose up at. I just look at what we have seen from him on the biggest stage, and this postseason, he ended up with 13 points in 12 games, but just 2 goals. And more notably, he had 5 points in the 7-game series against the Panthers and just 1 goal. And a guy who has put up a lot of numbers in the regular season, like, you need to find a way to elevate to another level. And for a guy that's been in the postseason every year since he has come into the league, here are the number of times that he has 1 or fewer goals in the postseason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, including last year when the Maple Leafs lost in 7 games in the first round, and he had 1 goal and 2 assists in 7 games. So it's not like it's, he has a quiet postseason here. He's kind of made a thing out of it.
Yeah, I really thought this year was going to be different. I mean, he had all that momentum with the Four Nations performance, that he had especially against Team USA, And I thought that he was going to ride that momentum into the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. And, just for whatever reason, he did, the pressure gets to him. I mean, it was awful for everybody. I mean, not only him, Austin Matthews, but like Austin Matthews said after the game, the Maple Leafs, they had too many passengers, and it just they couldn't get it done. All Florida's big guys stepped up, and Marner and was nowhere to be found.
He had the overtime winner was the goal that he scored against the Panthers. After that, he had 2 total shots on goal in the final 5 games of the series.
That's unacceptable for how much money he's making.
Yeah, and you had that clip of him looking at the Toronto bench and saying everybody needs to wake the F up. Like, grab the little pocket mirror and turn it on yourself, my man. Like, that, it's not all him. It's not all his fault.
Right.
That Toronto is out and feels like this season is yet another disappointment. But at the end of the day, and we've talked about this with Matt Boldy quite a bit. The players on your team that are paid the highest are the ones that are expected to perform on the brightest stage. And so while you have Matt Boldy taking a big step forward in this year's postseason, like, Mitch Marner just continues to kind of do this.
Plus, I mean, if you sign him, that leaves you just minimal cap space, and you're actually probably making your team worse, because then you're going to have to get rid of some guys, most likely. And so, you're looking at trying to get rid of, somebody on your D core that's the strength of the team, right? To create more cap space. And I just think they become a worse team, and they don't need that, because it took them to game 82 to get into the playoffs, right? So, you could get 2 players in the same amount that it would cost 1 for Marner, and that's what they need. They need more depth.
I would much rather take, and I know we're dealing with this similar thing with Kirill Kaprizov and whatever he ends up getting in his extension, should he choose to accept it.
Right.
That'll
Mission
be
Impossible line from you.
That will be a big, question as to what the cap ramifications are going forward. But Kirill he's shown pretty clearly that he is like the guy, whereas we don't really know if Marner is, because they have Austin Matthews, they've got William Nylander, so they have a very capable trio at the top. But it's still Austin Matthews that
right.
That
we'll find out, was Marner just an Austin Matthews merchant? Getting all those points off, the brilliance of Austin Matthews and the goal scorer that he is. So that's gonna be interesting to see, now that he doesn't have Austin Matthews to the next to him, if he can continue to put up those same type of numbers.
Was he the Marcus Johansson to Austin Matthews, Joel Eriksson Ek? Or the Victor Rask to Austin Matthews, Carell Kaprizov? No, all kidding aside.
Yes.
I'm right with you. I think if you take that 13 and you get somebody for 7-ish and you get somebody for 6-ish, I think that's money better spent.
Yes.
As opposed to really going top heavy. Then you're pretty much in the same spot where, yes, now you have a bona fide, like, you got 2 parts of a bona fide top line, but I would argue that the Wild have better depth on the wing than they do at the center position.
No, 100%. Yeah. And especially if they can get the way Matt Boldy played, against Vegas for an entire season, then watch out. And, it's nice that Urov is coming into a situation where he has another Russian too, to help with the transition, because he's coming in not knowing anything about Minnesota, right? And he's been in Russia, just a completely different situation than in the United States. So I'm glad he has Kirill there, and they're gonna have to be careful with him, because look, we we've talked about it off air too, on air here too. Jesper Wallstedt just, he was told things that were going to happen and they didn't happen, and he didn't handle it very well. So, if Yurov doesn't get what he wants to, how is he going to handle that? And at least he has a countryman, fellow Russian, to help him with the ups and downs. And, he has, like you told me in his contract, he has the option to bail out back to Russia. So
yeah,
well, that's one we're going to have to watch big time.
I wonder what the translation is for, hey, we're moving you to the fourth line because we think Justin Brazeau and Yakov Trenyan are your two best possible line mates.
Right.
I'm not bitter about that, if you can't tell by the fact that I continue to bring it up, even though the season is well over. I'm really going to be intrigued to see where Yurov gets put because, and this is not a knock on Marco Rossi by any stretch,
right?
But we hear so much about the playmaker that Danila Yurov is, and he has more of that, I think, in his game than Rossi does in his. So Yurov should be able to create his own shot more, which should lead to him being able to, be immune to some of those scoring slumps. Then again, I don't know. Put quality line mates with the guy and give him an opportunity to.
I mean, do you stick him? Do you stick him with Ogren too? Does Ogren make the team? That they have a couple of young guys where it's like, I mean, they won't even. Zeev isn't guaranteed. To make it, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah, I did see that, and I'm like, excuse me, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? Yeah, they'll have options, and these young players in theory should help solidify the depth if they make the team. But you and I both agree, Alex, that the center position is the biggest need for this team.
Yep.
You are in theory, and again, I keep saying this, Bill Guerin has not done anything yet. Marco Rossi is, as of right now, still a member of this team, so things can certainly change. But the way the wind is blowing, it seems as though you're going to be moving a critical piece from that depth. And so you better find a way to shore it up. And I'll tell you, the free agent market is not looking too hot for the center position. No. So we will take a look at who is available when we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where in the world all of your money went? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of having to juggle all the different finance apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals from one spot. No more multiple app checking. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Subscription numbers continue to boot up, which is a wonderful trend to see because we are in the off season, and usually at that point in the year, a lot of the more casual hockey fans kind of fall off, but numbers have been pretty consistent here so far.
We got people all over the world listening, so
yeah.
And
how about that?
We appreciate it.
And speaking of listening in and being an interactive part of the show, we've got our latest live show with Denny coming up here tonight, continuing to look at why the Wild are in the midst of an absolute crisis that they may or may not be able to recover from. So make sure to tune in tonight at 8 p.m. It's going to absolutely knock your socks off. Just like this free agent list at the center position will. Boy, oh boy. Now, if we look at the unrestricted free agents first, Alex, the first, they have them listed as far as their previous AAV. John Tavares is the first name on the list, but as you mentioned, he's not leaving Toronto, so cross him off the list. Nicholas Backstrom is 37, and
he's going to retire. Or there's no way. Yeah, he couldn't play this year. He's done.
So that's a no. Claude Giroux is 37. He's with Ottawa. Has kind of been mentioned as a potential option for faceoffs and for penalty killing. You know, the kind of thing that you want a player to come in and provide just that. But I mean, at this point, I don't see it likely that he leaves Ottawa for the final maybe 1 or 2 years of his career. And to sway him to do so, you may have to offer like a, I don't know, 2 or 3 year deal to do that. And do you really want to do that? So
you get older. Yeah.
If I'm the Wild, I'm probably a no in that regard. And then you go up and down the list. I mean, we've talked about Brock Nelson. That seems the most likely, which I'm kind of, I don't know. Just for what they're going to ask him to do, because he's going to come in and Billy's going to say, you're the 1C. No that's
doubt.
how that's going to play out. So
that's the only way to get him to sign, too.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping that Colorado overpays to keep him out of necessity because of their roster construction.
And the compensation they gave up to even acquire him. The fan base was really upset of how much they gave up, and especially a guy like Richie to the Islanders.
Looking at some of the other names too, I mean, obviously we've talked about Sam Bennett. He's probably the most appealing option. He looked great against Toronto too. He looked fantastic.
Throwing the body, scoring big goals. He's everything that you want in a player, especially that performs in the playoffs.
Yeah, and he's 28, so there's still some tread left on the tires. It's probably going to take about an 8-year deal to get him, but I think you have fewer worries about that contract looking bad at the end than you do with some of these other guys. But beyond that, another name that's on here that's kind of interesting is Matt Duchene, just because of what he's done with Dallas the last couple of seasons. He's 34.
Colorado too, and yeah.
So he's getting up there, and my worry there is that the magic has run out. And so you sign him to like a 2-year deal and his production just drops off substantially. Beyond that, I mean, Luke Cunnin.
We've seen that movie. We don't need to see it again.
Mikhail Granlund,
Nico Sturm. Movie, but he would never. Yeah, none of those would come back, I don't think.
The only one, and again, this is like 30% of this list is former Wild players, which just think about where
it tells you a lot. Yeah.
Think about where they'd be at as a team if they would have simply kept some of these guys. Ryan Donato, who just had a 30-goal season with the Chicago Blackhawks.
Good for him. But, I mean, I don't think he wants to come back here.
Yeah, go get paid by Utah. I don't care. So there aren't a ton as far as the unrestricted free agents go. Now, the restricted route, which is where the offer sheets come in, you've got Gabe Vilardi, who's 25. I would be shocked if he becomes available. You would think Winnipeg would make him a top priority, but they're kind of under cap constraints themselves.
Yeah, it's they're in a real tough spot, and when you pay your goalies so much too, right? That factors into everything. And they're at a crossroads because they win a president's trophy and they just get bounced. They just can't get over the hump in the postseason. And what do they do with Nikolai Ehlers too? Because that he's such a huge part of their offense. If they lose both of those guys,
it'd be tough.
Yeah.
Other names on the restricted free agent list: Marco Rossi, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Jack McBain.
We've seen that movie, or he didn't want to see the movie here.
Yeah, he notoriously said, "I don't want to play here," so the Wild traded him for a second-round pick, and he's been a bottom six type player for Utah the last few years. Murat Huznadinov,
we don't need
on
that.
This list.
We don't need that again.
Connor Dewar, another name on this list.
Jeez, just island of misfit toys.
There are there's a lot of weeding to do on the restricted side of things, but this gets into the offer sheets. And again, I'll mention, if you're going to offer sheet anybody, you have to have your original draft pick in order to do it. So anybody that gets offer sheeted from this year, this upcoming offseason, you have to have your 2026 draft picks to do it. So technically, if a player like Gabe Vilardi was going to make between $4.8 and $6.5 million per year, the Wilds could offer sheet him because they have their first and their third round pick. But do you want to go back-to-back seasons without a first-round draft pick because of all the capital that was given up to acquire David Jiricek, who famously came up and sat for 13 games, then immediately went down to Iowa and had his spleen rupture?
Yeah, I don't think so. And you don't know what you're going to get out of Charlie Strammel too. That could that could end up being just a gigantic misfire too. So, I mean, that's in multiple years of where it's like, oh boy, so that they're treading right there. It'd be tough to give up another first.
Which leads to the overarching theme of today's episode is that if you are going to improve at the center position, it's likely going to require a trade. So we'll talk about what that all entails as we finish off today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not already, so you don't miss out on any new episodes here throughout the week. We'll talk more about a potential Philip Gustafsson extension for you tomorrow, and what the Wild can learn from a general manager who also has the first name of Bill. We'll later this week take a look at how Bill Zito got the Florida Panthers to the Eastern Conference Finals for the third straight season by utilizing his draft picks efficiently and going and grabbing Brad Marchand, who scored in the decisive Game 7 victory and was just a general pest to Toronto the whole series. Hey, at least we got Gustav Nyquist, though. Don't get me started on that. Alex, so looks like it's going to require a trade, which again is why this whole Marco Rossi thing is a big head scratcher, because Marco Rossi's a center. Now his face-off winning percentage is it's about 46%, which is not great, but the only two players who have really gotten close to the 50% range, Joel Eriksson Ek until this last season, which we know he was dealing with core injuries throughout the whole year. So that hampered his ability to win faceoffs. And surprisingly, Freddie Gaudreau, the other one, who has kind of been in that 50-ish percentile range. Beyond that, it's not something the Wild have really ever been able to achieve. Routinely, they're in the bottom 5 in the league in faceoff winning percentage ever since Bill Guerin took over. And trying to find a top 6 center for one. Not easy because teams don't just part with those players because they have to. And what is it going to cost to get somebody like that? Like let's start in Buffalo, for instance. Obviously, I did an episode on this during the season when Buffalo had lost 13 games in a row. I said, let's give Buffalo a call and see what it would take to get Tage Thompson. Turns out they never recovered from that. And Tage Thompson, 72 points. He had a 44-goal season this past year. A great player, slightly more than Matt Boldy in terms of salary. I would, in a heartbeat.
100%.
If Buffalo said, who is off limits? Zeev and probably Yurov.
That's
all.
You can, you can have any of the prospects. You can have
Rossi. Yeah. You can have. I mean, at this point, like we've had the goalie debate a little bit, and I would be upset to part with Jesper at this point, but I think you feel comfortable with Philip Gustafsson as your guy right now.
And you don't know about Jesper. It's just it hasn't gone well as a pro yet. Obviously that can change quick. But if it gets you a legitimate all-star like Tage Thompson, and he's probably going to most likely be on the Olympic team. I mean, you do that in a heartbeat.
He better be.
That shot on the power play is lethal. Just imagine him out there with Kirill on the power play and Boldy. I mean, they'd have two legitimate, shooters, three. It would be special. And they have so many deep prospects. And Buffalo has, other than Dahlin, it's kind of a nightmare back there for their defense. Power, but like they need the help.
Outside the box, I know this may seem crazy, but this might not be a bad opportunity to offload a contract from the D-core. I know you would hate to do it for a player like Jonas Broaddin, but he's not getting any younger, and
gets hurt every season.
Yeah. Whereas Spurgeon came back and he played great all season after his injury, and it was not anything that he did. Getting slew-footed in the preseason is nothing he could control.
Right.
So I think maybe you use that as an opportunity. Because here's another thing for Buffalo. They're going to want a little veteran leadership to try to get this group back on top. And if you throw Broaddin in, you basically neutralize the salaries right there. And here's the other thing. Like, I'm just thinking about ways to try to improve how this team is done at home. Tage Thompson in home games this past season, 29 goals in 39 games at home. You want to talk about a guy who could get the crowd into it early on, as opposed to all those home games where you're in the third period, it's 0-0 or it's 1-0, and you're like, do you want to go? Like, there's nothing going on.
And a big guy that can actually skate.
Yeah, well, we should be careful. Should be careful about the whole skating thing, because clearly that's not a priority in this organization.
Apparently,
like, I don't know. But if you look at some of the other teams that have been, and I'm sure that'll be talked about more tonight. If you look at some of the other teams that are out of it, Detroit, they had that red hot stretch and they just completely fell apart. So maybe you could do something there. But as much as I've seen comments of people saying, hey, go get Dylan Larkin, I know there was some friction about the approach that they had at the deadline. I don't think Dylan Larkin's going anywhere.
No, he's from Michigan. He played at the University of Michigan. He's through and through a Michigan kid. I cannot see him ever leaving. He dreamed of being a Red Wing, and that's where he is.
Another one that people have asked me about, is, well, what about Matty Beniers with the Seattle Kraken?
Oh gosh.
And here's my thing on Beniers. It's not a great Kraken team, but if you gave me Marco Rossi and Matty Beniers side by side and said take your pick, I think at this point I just take Marco Rossi.
Yeah, you're getting more goals, and everything surrounding that Kraken organization is just it's no good. They just fired another coach. They should have never fired Dave Hackstall, and it's just been a nightmare ever since.
Yeah, there are, you have two coaches now, and the response from the players in both instances has been, well, we don't really want to play for this guy. Like, I don't want any part of any of that from that organization.
No, heck no. It's just the Wild don't need any, they don't need any bad influences coming into the locker room.
I would argue the only thing that kept the season from completely falling apart through all those injuries was how tight-knit the locker room was.
Right, 100%.
And you throw a bad apple into that, and
heck no.
That could cause some problems.
Yes, they don't need any friction.
No,
we've seen it happen in the past with this franchise, and all the drama that Ryan Suter and Zach Parise had in causing friction between old guys and young guys. They don't need any more of that ever.
And the only other team that I look at where you're definitely wanting to shake things up a little bit is like looking out east. I mean, the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins are two teams I think that are just they need to really kind of shake things up.
Yeah.
You'd be getting more veteran players in that case, but with the Islanders, I wonder if maybe you try for an Anders Lee.
Yeah, Edina kid. I've always been intrigued by Matt Barzal. He had some injuries this past season, but he is a center that is creative. He can win faceoffs. He's great on the power play. His creativity would be awesome with Kirill, and they fired their GM Lou Lamoriello, so they'll have a new GM there, and a lot of times the new GM wants his own type of player, and so maybe Barzal could become available for the right price.
And for Pittsburgh, it's like, take your pick. I mean, I know Sidney Crosby is very popular. Like, hey, Bill Guerin was there when Sid was there. Get Sid here. And I get it. Like, I understand. If you can convince Sidney Crosby to leave, and that's where that sentence ends, because I don't know that he wants. We don't know. Do you think he's going to want to go anywhere at this point in his career? Or is he going to want to be one of those guys that spends his entire career with one organization? And at this point, it's like, he had the Stanley Cups, and at this point, he's just kind of finishing it out.
Yeah, I can't see, I think he's just going to be like Ryan Getzlaf, who, even turned down deals. I remember Getzlaf's last season, there was a deal on the table for him to join Vegas, and he said, no, I'm just gonna, ride it out with the Ducks. Credit to him. I think it's really cool when a guy can stay that long with the same team. I'm sure Corey Perry never wanted to leave the Ducks, but just circumstances didn't allow that for him to happen. And the only team that, people talk about, Montreal, because that's, the team he grew up, being a Montreal fan. But, I could only see him really leaving for Colorado and playing with Nathan McKinnon is, they're so close. That would be the only team I could really see him leaving the Penguins. But he seems so loyal to that, to that Pittsburgh organization.
So the main point here today is the center position needs some upgrades, and they're going to be tough because outside of Sam Bennett and maybe a couple of other names, there aren't a ton of ideal options out there for what you're looking for. But this is just kind of further pointing to the fact that this has been an issue for the Wild for the last several seasons, honestly, since Kevin Fiala got traded. And I know Fiala wasn't a center, but second line scoring and depth has been an issue for this team for the last, ever since he got traded. They haven't filled that void. And if you are going to really open your competitive window right now, you have to get that figured out. And it can't be a Band-Aid. It's got to be a long-term solution, whether it be Urov or a free agent or a trade. Get that locked down.
Look at Colorado. I mean, they let Nazem Kadri walk, and they haven't been able to replace him ever since. And that, after winning the Cup, they just that's been haunting them. And for the Wild, the second line has haunted them for forever. And that's one of the main reasons why, they haven't been able to get out of the first round in the playoffs.
Because you've got no wiggle room now. Like the cap hits are, the buyouts are over.
This is it. This is a pivotal moment in this franchise's history. And we'll see if Bill Guerin, can work up some magic, because everything that he's doing right now, it could just blow up in flames if he doesn't do it right. This is the pivotal season, because if they don't make the playoffs, man, then it's really on him.
And do you want to be known as the guy who took a big swing? It's one thing to take a big swing and have it not work out. Sure, it happens. But do you want to be known as the guy who did not take any swings and just re-upped Gustav Nyquist for 3 years?
Yeah, and he's already made some interesting decisions. Keeping the Iowa staff down there, even though they've been absolutely horrendous, and it's really hurt the development of some of their high-ender prospects. And look what happened with Jesper too, and now Jesper is goalie option number 2. And what's going to happen there? Is he going to regain his confidence? That's to be determined.
We'll find out this offseason, but that'll do it for today's episode. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to join Denny and I tonight at 8 p.m. for the latest live show, as plenty to discuss, getting us set for the offseason. And make sure to stick with us here throughout the rest of the week as well. Should have the listener survey done by the end of this week. We'll get that rolling here before the Memorial Day weekend. And until then, have a great Monday, and we'll catch you for the next episode right here on Locked On Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.